All right, I guess we should call this rowdy group to order here. I feel like I'm in the Constitutional Convention here, except it's a lot cooler than it was in the summer of 1787. Well, welcome to the Museum of the American Revolution's 5th Carl M. Buchholz Memorial Lecture. I'm Scott Stevenson, President and CEO of the museum. I am pleased to welcome all of you here today and more than 80 people who are watching online from around the country. Please use that chat feature. Tell us, where you're tuning in from, and if any burning questions come up that you would like us to ask during the Q&A, feel free to put those in there, and we'll try to get to a few of those at the end of the evening. So tonight's lecture honors the tremendous life of Carl M. Buchholz, who served on the museum's founding board of directors for many years and was instrumental, really, in the founding of the museum, the time when we acquired the site here in 2010 and started the campaign to build the Museum of the American Revolution. This is the largest Carl M. Buchholz lecture by far that we have ever held, and so we're really, there we go. Can you tell who was a dear friend and colleague of Carl at DLL Piper? We're also pleased to welcome tonight the Committee of 70 Buchholz Fellows. And will you fellows raise your hands? You don't have to sit in the back, for goodness sakes. So the Committee of 70 is a nonpartisan civic leadership organization based here in Philadelphia that advances representative, ethical, effective government, not just for Philadelphia, but for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in general, through citizen engagement, through public policy advocacy. And we've been pleased to have a great working relationship with the committee for many years. The Buchholz Fellowship Program was established in 2016 in Carl's honor, the same year that the speaker program, the lecture, was founded here at the museum. And this idea is to cultivate and grow new generations of civic leaders here in Philadelphia. So we're really excited to have you with us here this evening. Now, I'm looking forward to the talk and lecture this evening from Professor Akhil Reed Amar. But first, I want to take a moment to thank the sponsors who've made this evening possible. First, Comcast NBC Universal, DLA Piper, Macro, which is a Seville's company. We'll save the applause for the end, Karen. Lisa Kabnick and John McFadden, who are up here somewhere in the front. Nancy and Morris Offit, very nice. Martha McGeary Snyder, longtime member of our board. And we received additional support from Morgan Lewis and Wisvis Bank. So please, thanks to all of them. We're grateful to our hosts from the Buchholz family tonight, most importantly, Karen Buchholz and Alex Buchholz and Julia Buchholz. But Alex and Julia weren't able to be here tonight because they have jobs, really good jobs. And our co-hosts for the evening, Sarah Bouchard, Michael Glatt, Lisa Kabnick, and John McFadden, listed twice. Thank you for your double role tonight. Roger Levinson, again, Morris and Nancy Offit, Stephen and Debbie Schwab, and tonight's support is in memory of Stephen's father, the late Reverend Anthony Wayne Schwab. And for those of you who are local, yes, that Anthony Wayne. And Martha McGeary Snyder. That actually makes you sort of royalty here in Philadelphia, even though you're an interloper from Chicago. So, of course, it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome our dear friend Carol Daugherty Buchholz tonight, who will introduce the program. Karen, of course, is one of the great stars of Philadelphia's corporate and civic life in Philadelphia. Has been a longtime supporter of the museum, a former board member of the museum, and we're so grateful, Karen, for your tireless advocacy to advance our mission, particularly in our infant years, that we still, like we're just a toddler museum right now, so thank you. And please, on to the main event.
Well, thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. Right, sorry. Thank you, Scott. Thank you to the entire team here at the Museum of the American Revolution for making this evening possible. It is wonderful to share the evening with so many friends and to take part in what I know will be a delightful discussion with our special guest, the acclaimed constitutional scholar and Yale law professor, Akhil Reed Amar. Welcome to Philadelphia, Professor. Where is the professor? I know he came in. Oh, he's over there. You snuck over there for me. Or perhaps I should say welcome back to Philadelphia. I know you were here just in 2019 when you addressed the Committee of 70's annual luncheon. Lauren Christella, the organization's president, is also here with me, and we all want to welcome you to our great city. I also learned that the professor has been here many times before, including when he was a very young child with his mom, and I think we might hear a little more about that too. But the nice thing is that we've got some inspiration that happened here too, so we feel like we're part of your journey. In the weeks leading up to tonight's event, I received quite a lot of messages, and the tone was consistent. Pure excitement at the chance to meet Professor Amar for the first time. He is Yale's only living professor to have won the university's unofficial Triple Crown: the Sterling Chair for Scholarship, the Devane Medal for Teaching, and the Lamar Award for Alumni Service. He is the author of several books and more than 100 law review articles. He regularly testifies before Congress at the invitation of both parties, and Professor Amar has been cited by Supreme Court justices across the spectrum in more than 24 cases. Just incredible. It is a true honor to hear and learn from him tonight. I was also personally moved by many of you who were equally inspired to participate in tonight's lecture as a personal tribute to Carl. The gathering of friends and family to comfortably dive into the exploration of political thought with a good glass of wine or two and a healthy, maybe even a little heated, debate on our country's ideas and ideals, well, that perfect combination, that is the very essence of Carl. And it's the spark that continues to liven our home and bring Alex, Julia, and me so much joy. Healthy debate, the thorough examination of differing ideas, is what inspired our country's revolution, chartered our republic, and infused the ultimate debate of all time, the words that would ultimately become our Constitution. Debate is freedom, and it's why my family is so proud of tonight's lecture and the continuous exchange of thoughtful ideas. And to that end, Professor Amar, and in true Buchholz debate form, I read your National Review article this past July declaring independence from founding father Thomas Jefferson, given some of his not so great ideas as both an advisor to our first commander-in-chief and in his service as our third president. The points of your article were sound. My favorite point of all, centering on your argument that we find ways to pay regular tribute to the incredible men and women who contributed to the country's independence and governance. A small footnote I'll offer for your distinguished review is that perhaps one of Jefferson's better, if not most successful, ideas and endeavors of his life was his creation of the University of Virginia, Carl's and Scott's alma mater. The inscription to the gate of the university matches the institution's academic approach, and I would argue this very museum's intention too. It reads, "Here we are not afraid to follow the truth wherever it may lead, nor to tolerate any error so long as reason is left free to combat it." More than words, the intentional act of creating space for students to pursue the truth and to face and fix errors, this intention is what also aligns so well with your incredible, more than 30-year career working and writing, as you have often said, for your students. Tonight, for a few special moments at our storied Museum of the American Revolution, it is a distinct honor for us all to transition from patrons to students. Tonight is our privilege to be Professor Amar's students. Thank you for leading this very special discussion at this incredibly pivotal time for our country. Please join me in welcoming Professor Akhil Reed Amar to the stage.
So I only just met Karen, but she is quite extraordinary, as you all know. And so let me actually pick up on the invitation she extended to you all to tell you a story about my previous experiences here in Philadelphia. She shared with me a story that, was it yesterday that your daughter turned 25?
Yes.
Yesterday was her daughter's 25th birthday, and I shared with her that I always wonder why on a birthday the kid gets the presents rather than the mom. And so this is the first time I've been back in this amazing city since my own mom passed away about a year ago, and memory is very geographic. You know, Proust writes about this when you come to a place you haven't been to in a while. So I want to tell you, my dad's still around. And my mom would have turned 91 this week. But I want to tell you why I do what I do. Because when I was 10 years old, my parents brought me to this town. And I want to tell you that story, just because we're here to remember founding fathers, but mothers play a role too. So she took me to bookbinders, and we walked through the city hand in hand, and I walked under William Penn's statue, and we went to the Benjamin Franklin Institute of Science and the amazing museum. I still remember the Rubens painting of Prometheus and the Rock. But here's why I do what I do. I'm a little 10-year-old kid. My parents are immigrants from India. There's a medical conference, and I'm 10, and they bring me here. And we go to Independence Hall. And I'm 10, but truthfully, I look as if I'm about 7, and they were talking about how the first, an early Congress met in Independence Hall, and I raised my hand. And everyone else, they're all physicians and spouses, and so I asked the tour guide, I said, how many members of the House were here in that first session? And she says, like 65. And she says, and how many senators were there? And I didn't know the answer, but then I thought, okay, but wait a minute. There were 13 states, colonies that became 13 states. There are 2 senators per state, so 13 times 2. So I said 26. And, and people, they thought I was like 7 years old. And, maybe I didn't quite look like their vision of a standard American at that time. This was a while ago. This would have been 68. So everyone starts clapping. And I thought, I can do this. Yeah, this would be pretty cool, So that's a true story, and I'm thinking about my mom right now, and we should all think about mothers, because where would we be without them? So I'm going to read you, and my friend Andy Lipka is here. We have a podcast together. It's free. It's weekly. It's called A Marxist Constitution. He says, Akhil, don't read the thing. So I won't. I'll move off the page from time to time. But this is a story of the written Constitution, because they're various important documents. This is one of them. I have several copies, but of the thing. And of course, it originates here. Oh, here's another copy. Oh, this is actually the National Constitution Center copy that I've got. I've got several more somewhere. But and of course, you've heard the Philadelphia story before. I'm going to try to tell it in a different way. This is from chapter 4 of my new book. chapter 5. It's called America. And it's a different way of telling the story of the Constitution. It's not going to tell it day by day, week by week, issue by issue. We have those stories in part because we have transcripts of a certain sort, Madison's notes, that very great scholars have turned into wonderful books, like Catherine Drinker Bowen's book, Miracle at Philadelphia. And many of you have experienced that. I'm going to tell you a different way of thinking about the story, which is more conceptual than theatrical. I'm going to actually tell you how the whole thing fits together, what it actually is all about. It's not quite as random as you think. It's actually a system, and by the end of today, I hope you'll actually see what the big problems were that they were trying to solve and how they solved them. But solving one entailed questions that then they had to solve on another issue and then on another issue. Those of you who've ever done Sudoku or something like that, this is actually the spirit of this chapter, when I'm actually going to work you through how you actually have to solve a series of problems to get to the conclusion. So here's the thought experiment. Here's how I begin. Imagine for a moment that lightning had struck Virginian James Madison as he made his way toward Philadelphia in early May 1787. In the preceding months, Madison and several dozen other notables who ranked among America's most distinguished statesmen had been tapped by their home state governments with the blessing of the Confederation Congress, which of course meets over here, to meet in a grand constitutional convention to propose modification of the failing Articles of Confederation. The delegates' charge was to devise a legal blueprint that would render the continental governance structure adequate to its basic purposes. Okay, so that's the problem. We're a big, geographically spread out place, and we're not actually working well together. So, had Madison, or for that matter, had any single other American leader, other than the indispensable George Washington, missed the Philadelphia Convention, would Americans nonetheless have ended up with something similar to the Constitution that in fact materialized? And my claim is going to be, as long as Washington was here, we were going to get to the same result, even if you'd had a different cast of characters. So that's the thought experiment is, so suppose Madison weren't here. Okay, proper analysis begins by considering the broad outlines of the draft document that emerged from the Philadelphia Convention in September 1787, and thereafter received a sufficient number of state ratifications to go into effect by its own terms in late 1788. So I'm reminding you, see, that this text that emerges at the end of that long, hot summer, September 17th, so just this time of year, is only a proposal, you see, and it's going to need to be ratified by the American people. And it's going to actually build on stuff that the American people have already done in 13 states, 11 new state constitutions, all except Connecticut and Rhode Island. So a lot of the work is actually done before Philadelphia, although this is not how the story is conventionally told, and will happen after Philadelphia, because they got to propose something that people are going to say yes to. So it's a mistake, I think, to look just at what's happening in the room rather than to think about, that's why the chapter is called America, outside the room. The document described itself as a constitution and not as a confederation or league or treaty. So just like that word, okay? It's a different sort of thing. Nowhere did the new document proclaim, as had the old articles, the Articles of Confederation, that each state would remain sovereign. Okay, so I just told you something really important. Some of the most important things in the Constitution are the words that aren't there, like sovereign. So, like, when you talk to someone, you look them in the eye and you say, I love you. And if they don't say I love you back in about 5 seconds or less, that's actually pretty significant. Yeah, you have to pay attention to not just the words that are in the thing, but what's not in the thing compared to what went before. So I say that, that word sovereign was a notable and pointed omission. Like its state constitutional precursors, the document was compact, written in plain English, and designed for easy newspaper publication and republication in full. America emerges because it's a land of newspapers, from Ben Franklin on, okay? Without newspapers, no constitution, no democracy, no discourse. It opened with a single sentence, promising that the document's legal force and legitimacy would come from the citizenry themselves via a series of exceptionally democratic votes. And those words are on the front of the National Constitution Center, you see, and they're so familiar to us, we kind of forget what they're saying. We, the people, not ordinary legislatures, would, in fact, ordain and establish this new Constitution for the United States of America. We're actually doing something. We, the people, do ordain and establish. We're putting it to a vote, and that's new in the world. The Declaration of Independence, for example, is not put to a vote. None of the 1776 state constitutions are put to a vote. No democracy in the history of the world before 1776 had ever put a constitution to a vote, and very few had constitutions. But in ancient Athens or Sparta or what have you, there's not a document put to a vote. Magna Carta, it's not even written in English, and it's not put to a vote. This is pretty extraordinary. This two-letter word, do. We do a certain thing. Many of you, I'm guessing, have gotten up at a certain point in your life and said, I do. And you have to be really careful when you say it, because you've just done it. My wife and I celebrated our 34th anniversary last week, and so, but that's performative, and that's like we do, we agree, we consent. One sentence, and I don't want you to forget actually what's behind that. That's the America, and it hasn't yet happened in Philadelphia. This is what they're hoping will happen. This is a script of a wedding, in fact, still to be performed. Okay. The preamble did not detail how this would happen, but the Constitution closed with a one-sentence code. So look at the first sentence, look at the last sentence. Article 7, which stylistically counterbalanced and substantively clarified the preamble's one-sentence intro. The coda specified the people would do the preamble promised establishment via special ratifying conventions. Each state would hold an ad hoc convention which would ideally receive its mandate from a particularly inclusive electorate, Massachusetts style. No state convention would bind any other, and 9 state convention approvals would suffice to establish the Constitution among the ratifying states. The preamble also set forth the basic purposes of the new Constitution, which promised a more perfect union than the evidently imperfect one then in place under the Articles of Confederation, and linked that more perfect union to strengthening the common defense. That's the key to the Constitution, I argue. That's a phrase that appears 3 times in the Articles of Confederation, twice in the Constitution, the preamble, Article 1, Section 8, first sentence. After the preamble, so now the next 3 pages, I'm going to nerd out a bit and just be law professor and walk you through the short document, just so you remember what's in it. So after the preamble, which is like, we're going to vote on this thing, came Article 1, introducing a very new kind of Congress. Unlike the unicameral and quasi-executive Confederation Congress, the Constitution's new bicameral Congress would operate as a true legislature, modeled on standard state legislatures and explicitly vested with legislative power to make real laws. Now, if you're a Pennsylvanian, that might not, strike you as so significant, because Pennsylvania is one of the 2 states that actually has a unicameral legislature at the time, the other being Georgia. But all the rest have bicameral legislatures, and that wasn't true of the Confederation Congress. Now we're going to make this a real legislature that passes real laws. None of those words appear in the Articles of Confederation. Congress isn't described as a legislature. Their output isn't described as laws, much less supreme law, much less supreme law of the land. So this is a new thing that's being proposed. A lower house would be directly elected by voters every other year and would be apportioned based on population, with each slave counted as 3/5 of a free person. Under the Articles, you don't even get to vote for Congress at all, but now you will, at least for the lower house. A smaller upper house, the Senate, retained vestiges of the Confederation Congress. Its members would be picked by state legislatures, and each state would count equally. And of course, that takes me back to 10 years old. Oh, 2 senators per state, 13 states. Oh, the answer is 26, it turns out. Okay. Unlike members of the old Congress, however, members of this new Senate would vote per capita. They're not voting as a bloc. And would serve for a long 6-year term. Under the Articles, it was an annual election, would be immune from state recall, would draw payment from the central government, and would be free to seek unlimited re-election. So even the Senate, that looks kind of like the old Congress, is different in all these ways. Voting individually, 6-year terms, re-eligible, paid by the national government. The powers of this new Congress were sweeping. Inheriting almost all the old Congress's specific powers, the new body would also have power to impose a wide range of taxes on individual Americans, import duties, sales excises, land assessments, head taxes, and more. So this is a big, stinky tax system, and you're going to like it. Okay, we've just fought a revolution against taxation, and now we're going to have a constitution that's all about taxation. And why is that okay? Because it's going to come with representation, you see. Rather than relying on states to provide requisition troops, as had the Congress under the Articles of Confederation, the new Congress could create, regulate, and fund a new national army in both wartime and peacetime. The new Congress would moreover have power to regulate trade, other interactions with Indian tribes, foreign nations, as well as between Americans in different states. More generally, Congress 2.0 would not be limited to powers expressly conferred, so we're going to have some implied powers. This new Congress would have broad powers to regulate and monitor the new branches, the new executive branch. Old Congress was unicameral. Now we're going to have a separate branch called the executive, a third branch called the judiciary. So it looks really different than we had under the Articles. In contrast to the Articles, whose collective Congress performed a range of war directing and other executive functions, the Constitution created a separate executive branch headed by a single and muscular new officer. This is going to be the most dangerous thing, the new Constitution. So much power in one person. And it was designed for George Washington, and maybe we're going to talk about in the Q&A that powerful presidency. Okay, he's described by Article 2 as a president of the United States, and he's going to get to negotiate treaties, command armies and navies, supervise executive underlings, perform a wide range of other functions, not all of them itemized in detail. The president has actually some vast and enumerated powers, it turns out. He would wield a powerful veto pen and a sturdy pardon pen. He would not be directly elected by American voters, but he would have an electoral base independent of Congress and could seek re-election every 4 years without limit. So that's Article 1. I just told you about Article 2. Here's Article 3. Again, we're just working through the Constitution, sort of nerd-like, just so then we're going to try to figure out how does it all fit together? Why did they do all this stuff? Article 3 mapped out a new standing federal judiciary, which likewise was given considerable independence from Congress, life tenure and guaranteed salary. The new judges would rule on federal law, including the law of the Constitution itself, and enjoy appellate authority over state courts that could hear federal law cases in the first instance, but would not be the last word. Okay, so that's Article 1, 2, 3. We've done the preamble. Okay, almost done. Article 4 echoed and clarified the interstate provisions of the Articles of Confederation, how states are going to kind of interact with each other. Article 5 lays down procedures for amending the Constitution, unlike the Confederation, which was a mere treaty among sovereign states and therefore required unanimous state approval for any treaty modification. Well, Article 5 is going to be different because the problem is you can't get 13 to ever agree on anything. Okay, so unanimity is going to just mean failure. So Article 5 amendments need to clear a high democratic bar, to be sure, requiring broader democratic support than ordinary statutes, but you're not going to need to get each and every state to say yes, because there's always someone who's going to be obstreperous. In contrast to, okay, so now we have the preamble, we're going to ordain the thing, legislature, bicameral, executive, presidency, independent judiciary, interstate relations, some rules for constitutional amendment. Hammering these points home and breaking decisively with the Articles of Confederation, Article 6 made clear that the new Constitution would stand as the, quote, supreme law of the land. See, these words aren't in the Articles, not supreme law, not land. Binding and uniting all Americans. So that's going to be the Civil War issue, and the Constitution's clear on this. Even state officials would pledge allegiance to the federal Constitution above all. They didn't need to do that in the Articles. State and federal officials would also pledge to obey all proper federal statutes, which would trump state statutes, even state constitutions. Okay, we can now return to our question. If a different set of delegates had convened in Philadelphia, how much would their solution have differed from the document that in fact emerged from the conclave? John Adams was not in the room, nor was Thomas Jefferson. If we substitute them for, say, James Madison and Elbridge Gerry, so I'm swapping out a Virginian and a Massachusetts person for a different Virginian and Massachusetts person, would the result have changed dramatically? What if Samuel Adams or Patrick Henry had attended? You see, they didn't. Of course, history happened as it happened, once and complexly. We cannot run a laboratory experiment to test and conclusively prove whether it would have happened differently and by how much had this person never been born, or had that person never entered the room, or yet another person showed up instead of or in addition. So this isn't going to be like a perfect Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life movie where Clarence is going to show him like what it would have been like, because we can't do that scientifically, but we can make some inferences. Okay, if we take seriously that there was this American constitutional conversation, begins all the way in 1764, and it's already, and goes through 1776, and now it's more than 20 years later, and these are the early chapters of the book. And my not-so-hidden agendas, I want you to read the book. You see, this is already the 5th chapter. But if you take seriously, there's been a lot of discussion before Philadelphia in 1787. We can see that most of the Constitution that emerged simply followed from the logic of that previous conversation, including especially the state constitutions and how they're doing stuff. A set of grave, indeed existential concerns existed in 1787, as did a set of available legal and intellectual tools generated by the conversation. The challenge confronting the delegates was akin to an intricate but solvable math problem in the tradition of Euclid and early expositors of algebra. Certain constraints, equations, axioms, postulates were already locked in place. Given all these, the delegates, in effect, were asked to solve for X. More precisely, their charge could be paraphrased as follows. This is what they came to do. The Confederation is broken. Please propose something that will actually work to achieve the Confederation's basic goals. Okay? That's what they're asked to do. Let us now methodically try to work through the problem as it existed in 1787. Massachusetts and Virginia had only recently met metaphorically. They don't know each other so well. They had come together along with other states that had only recently met to stage a revolution and win a war against the world's mightiest empire. They don't know each other very well, but they have to join or die, to borrow from a Philadelphian named Ben. Okay? So they come together and they don't know each other very well, truth be told. In this war, the states, for certain limited purposes, had to join or die. Massachusetts wanted to govern itself, and Virginia likewise sought self-rule. The same was true for the other former colonies that had and here's the quote from the Declaration of Independence, free and independent states in 1787. They're independent even of each other, except as they chose to coordinate. They're more like NATO or the EU. The state constitutions of 1776 to 1787 were exuberant expressions of self-government and also illustrations of how states were following and learning from sister states as part of a genuinely continental and fast unfolding American constitutional conversation. So what they really want, what Massachusetts really wants is to be Massachusetts, and Virginia wants to be Virginia, and they can learn from each other, but the problem is they're going to need to actually work together much more closely than they had thought in 1776, because otherwise the system will fail. No state, here's the key point, could have any self-governance whatsoever if the British were to return and reconquer America. Britain is 3 times as populous, not counting Ireland, and their economy is 2 or 3 times as advanced. So, Washington's victory was a triple bank shot, and we needed the French, and you can't count on that again. That's the challenge. We're so powerful now, we forget that back then we were much more like Ukraine or Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, something like that. Okay, so there was going to be no self-government if the French were to turn against their recent American allies and crush them. France is 3 times bigger than Britain, which is 3 times bigger than us, you see. Or if the French and British were to form a cynical alliance and partition America between the 2 empires, as Europe's great powers had recently partitioned Poland. Or if Spain were to strengthen its position and successfully ally with the other powers in America, and they were talking about all this behind our backs. And Washington, you see, is aware of all this. Old world monarchies and aristocracies commanded vastly more wealth and more population than did the budding United States of America. France alone had 8 times as many inhabitants, nearly 30 million in all. These old powers had acted ruthlessly to expand their empires over the past century. Okay. Britain had refused to evacuate the northwestern forts as promised. They're highlighted in this museum here. And of course, retained Canada. With British backing, several northern Indian tribes impeded, maybe not the Oneida, but several others, impeded access to the fur trade and vexed settlers. British and French trade barriers had closed certain European and West Indian ports to various American goods and American ships. Spain, which controlled vast tracts on the Confederation's southern and western flanks, had shut the port of New Orleans to American farmers, hoping thereby to dislodge large chunks of America's backcountry and pull them into Madrid's orbit. If you're Daniel Boone in Kentucky, you can't get anything out or in without going through the Mississippi River in New Orleans, and they're trying to shut it down to put pressure on Kentucky to break away from Virginia, you see. So America's going to need to pry open all these boxes with a crowbar, and they're going to need to combine, you see, to form a strong crowbar. Washington, more than anyone, knew just how precarious America's geostrategic situation truly was. The survival of his army at Brooklyn in 1776 was a miracle. So was his jaw-dropping, war-winning 17 adventure at Yorktown, where friendly French sailors and soldiers had outnumbered American ground troops more than 2 to 1. It's more a French victory, truth be told, than an American victory. Now I'm going to give you some life advice here. Just like if you say I love you and they don't say I love you back, pay attention to that. Life and Washington understands this life advice. Do not count on the French. Never count on the French. Okay? Truthfully, no nation should ever count on any other nation. That's just not how nations work. And I believe in helping Ukraine, but not every American does, and now you know what a cold, cruel world it is. And the reason Americans are free is that basically, and you're going to hear in the rest of this story, that we have a huge moat that separates us from the thuggish Putin, and they don't. That's what the Constitution is all about, you see. And that's the story that I'm going to tell you, and it's a slightly different story than Catherine Drinker Bowen's day-by-day, week-by-week drama. Okay. In a future crisis, America had to be capable of, so here's what we have to do: fielding an army, equipping a navy, borrowing money from abroad if needed. And by the way, if you're going to borrow money, you have to pay it back. Okay, that's just like how it works. I'm just telling you, like, there are not very many students here in the audience, but that's the idea. You borrow money and then you pay it back. But anyway, the Union had not paid American veterans or American creditors as promised for the last war. This was a stain on American honor and might doom efforts to raise money and troops the next time around. Washington knew there would be a next time, even if he did not know clearly how, when, why, and against whom. In theory, the Articles had empowered the Confederation Congress to raise troops and money by requisitioning states. In practice, states had not complied as promised. Those of you who've seen with your kids or your grandkids Shrek 1, when Shrek says, like, you and what army? So what are you going to do? Virginia, you're supposed to provide your troops. Now, what are you going to do if they don't? You're going to throw Virginia in jail? How's that going to work? Okay. The obvious solution, solve for X, was to empower Congress to raise money and troops directly. Almost all states had, in fact, agreed to do this, but Rhode Island says no, or New York says no, and so you just can't get unanimity, okay? So unanimity itself needs to be abandoned. The Articles had said you can't change the Articles without all 13 states agreeing, okay? You're never going to get that because there's always Ted Cruz or whatever, or Josh Hawley. Some of these are my students, okay, but there's always going to be someone, okay? So you have to abandon unanimity. Here's why. Okay, when they show up at Philadelphia, okay, Rhode Island doesn't even appear. You can't get unanimity if Rhode Island's not even there, so you're going to have to break the Articles of Confederation and cut the Gordian knot and start from scratch. If the new Congress were allowed to raise troops directly and tax individual Americans, it would be a true legislature. To have proper revolutionary legitimacy, Congress would need to derive its authority from direct popular election. Given that individuals themselves were to be taxed, individuals themselves have to be represented in a new House of Representatives that would be America's House of Commons. No taxation without representation. Under the Articles, states are represented, states are taxed, and they don't pay. And what are you going to do? Under the Constitution, we have to tax individuals because you can squeeze them. My taxes are about to come due. I always wait 6 months, so I got to file, next week. And they know how to squeeze me, so I'm going to pay. Okay, that would be my good legal advice to you: pay. Okay, but if I'm going to be taxed, I have to be represented, and I wasn't under the Articles, but these things fit together. Okay. So now if we're going to create a real legislature, a genuine legislature, we're going to actually have to make it look like a real legislature, like the states. They're bicameral. It's going to have a lot more power, so we've got to break up power a lot more carefully than under the Constitution. Under the Confederation. Okay. So we're going to need, for example, to give Congress authority to regulate the Western Territory. Now, the Articles of Confederation had already begun to do this, but without any authority whatsoever. They just did it because if you don't, the states will start fighting amongst each other because there's gold in them thar hills. But if we're actually going to hang together, we're going to have to tax and have an army and have a navy and regulate the West and have a lot more power to deal with foreign affairs even than we had under the Articles of Confederation. And now it's going to need to look like a real legislature, okay? The best governed state, we not only need a real legislature that's bicameral, a separate executive, and we're going to want to give that person a veto pen because now they're dealing with a very powerful legislature. The best state, Massachusetts, gives its governor a veto pen, you see. We're going to need an independent judiciary, just like the states have, because we're creating such a more powerful legislature. So if there's so much more power in this new central government, we're going to have to divide power a lot more carefully within the legislature, bicameralism, and across the three branches, you see. These things fit together. To solve the national security problem, you have to have a lot more central power. Now it's much more dangerous, so you're going to have a much more careful separation of powers than you had under the Articles of Confederation. So X, national security, entailed Y and Z. What else? The new system would fix the main problems of the Articles of Confederation, but would drain considerable power. Who are the big losers in this? Well, Britain, France, Spain, the Native Americans. Who else? The states. They're going to lose a lot of power. These state legislatures, filled with small-minded and short-sighted leaders, it was very different back then, of course, who did not understand the larger geostrategic threats. Many of these men had never been more than 100 miles from home, might initially resist a bold new plan for USA 2.0. But ordinary Americans, just the voters, might well approve of a new system. It's not going to drain power from them. It may drain power from state legislatures, but not from ordinary voters. They'll vote for it as long as it realistically promised to work, and here's the key, and was backed by George Washington, who has a lot of credibility, and enough other respectable notables up and down the continent, like Ben Franklin. Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation said that no amendment to the Articles could take effect unless every single state legislature said yes. And that's never going to happen. So now we're going to have a different sort of ratification process that's not going to require unanimity and goes over the heads of the state legislatures who are too small-minded. Okay, so what they do, these insiders meeting behind closed doors, they propose a radical outsider solution. They're going to appeal directly to the people themselves. This we do to legitimate their project. So this is the most audacious thing in the history of the world. Never before would so many people be allowed to vote on how they and their posterity are to be governed. Because remember, Declaration of Independence not put to a popular vote, none of the state constitutions of 1776, but Massachusetts in 1780 had put its constitution to vote. We're going to do best state practices. So we want to look like Massachusetts. They have a good governor. They put theirs to a vote. And we may lose, but if we win, we will have unparalleled legitimacy. Because we put it to a vote, we could lose, and the people will have voted for us. Okay? But now, if that's true, okay, if that's the idea, in order to gain popular support, the document would need to have democratic bona fides beyond the ratification procedure itself. It's not just going to be one person, one vote, one time. In order to win one crucial set of continental ratification elections in 1787-88, the document would need to promise ongoing democracy for myriad future elections. So the House would need to be more representative than the Congress under the Articles of Confederation. Remember, you didn't get to vote for Congress under the Articles of Confederation. Property qualifications are going to need to be abandoned. What property qualification do you need to be a member of the House of Representatives? None. What proper qualification do you need to be a senator in the United States? None. What proper qualification do you need to be a president of the United States? None. That's not true in any state constitution other than Pennsylvania's. And Pennsylvania doesn't have much of a governor, it has a kind of a council. This is not what you were taught. You were taught by your teachers, it's a bunch of fat cats meeting in Philadelphia behind closed doors of, by, and for the 1%. This is the Beard story, the Zinn story, and my book says it's basically crap. It's not true to the facts. They're putting the thing to a vote in which in 8 of the 13 states, property qualifications to vote on the Constitution are lowered or abandoned compared to what they are ordinarily. In New York, all adult free male citizens get to vote on the Constitution. No race tests, no literacy tests, no property tests, and no religious tests. Those are not the ordinary rules in New York. We, the people, do ordain and establish this Constitution. The world will never be the same after this happens, and we're going to do it up and down the continent. This is not your father's story that you've heard. It's a different story, and you'll have to decide for yourself after you read the book whether the facts support this narrative. Okay. In broad outline, then, this was the abstract answer, the most logical answer to the problems that the Philadelphia framers were asked to solve. I'm going to just now, how many minutes do I have left? I have 5 minutes left? I'll just tell you, who were you taught is the father of the Constitution? James Madison. That's ridiculous. I was taught that too. You know, and if I'd been asked that at 10 years old, that would have been the right answer. No. First of all, James Madison is 5'4". Okay, apart from Napoleon, you know, short people are not listened to. I speak from experience here. No one has ever heard of James Madison. Every single original idea that he proposes, that's original actually at Philadelphia, gets shot down. I give you the details in this chapter. The big ideas of the Constitution are a hugely powerful federal government for national security reasons and a vastly powerful president, far more powerful than any state governor. Only one state governor has a veto pen, and he is elected annually in Massachusetts. So 4-year, perpetually re-eligible, independent of the legislature, veto pen, pardon pen, commanding Continental Army and Navy. Nothing like this exists anywhere in America. The Constitution was designed by and for George Washington. That's why he's the unanimously elected presiding officer at Philadelphia. That's why lots of people vote for the Constitution who are on the fence because Washington is going to actually, they believe, lead the country. If Virginia ratifies, Virginia does ratify, and Washington is asked to lead the country. He's the unanimously elected President of the United States. Every single elector votes for him. Every single elector votes for him a second time around. He's the unanimously re-elected President of the United States. And the reason is everyone can trust him because he had the only army on a continent, and he could have made himself king, and he didn't, and he gave it up. And so it is Washington's Constitution. Obviously, the national capital is not named Madison, D.C. The tallest building in the world in 1880 is not called the Madison Monument. In fact, there still isn't really much of a Madison Monument. So I'm ending now. Here's what I'm telling you. I actually got the right answer when I was 10 years old. The answer was 26, it turns out. It was lucky. But many of the right answers that you've been taught, oh, it's James Madison who's father of the Constitution. Oh, it's an elite project behind closed doors of, by, and for the 1%. I was taught those things too. I don't think they're the right answers today, actually. So I really want you to, if you have the time, to engage the book because it tells a different story than the one that all of us were told. It tells an extraordinary story about two amazing things that happened in Philadelphia, but there's a difference. The first one, in 1776, it's epic, but it's not put to a vote, and the people who oppose it are basically told that they have to leave. There's almost no one who opposes the Declaration of Independence who goes on to any significance in America. The Constitution, by contrast, is put to a vote a whole year up and down the continent with people. I love it, Karen, that you're talking about debate. They're raucously debating, and you can oppose the Constitution, and many do, and you're not voted off the island. You can become President of the United States, James Monroe. Vice President of the United States, Elbridge Gerry, George Clinton. What's the first thing that ordinary people say when they read the thing? They say, dudes, you forgot the rights. To secure, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And people say, if government exists to secure rights, you've forgotten the Bill of Rights. And all the state constitutions have bills of rights. That's the first thing they say, and they're right. And so the first thing that happens after ratification is George Washington says, the Bill of Rights is not James Madison's idea. He actually opposes it at Philadelphia. It's more George Washington's idea to bring everyone on board. Okay, so these two epic things happened in Philadelphia, and I'm thinking about my mom who brought me here when I was 10 years old. And we went to Independence Hall, and we learned about the Declaration of Independence Constitution. And they're both epic, but as good as the Declaration was, the Constitution was put to a vote, and people voted against it, and they weren't voted off the island, and they had good ideas that were brought into the project. We call that the Bill of Rights. The Constitution is still imperfect today. We need amendments perhaps are necessary. We need to make amendments. We haven't talked about slavery very much. I promise in the book I do talk about slavery. But we can't even begin to understand how to fix the system unless we actually understand how it came about. And that's why, I had a little bit of time with you, and I'm giving you a little bit of a taste of the book. But to really not just learn stuff, but unlearn stuff, I hope you read the book if you have the time. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for bringing me back to this amazing city with all its memories for me and my family. Thank you very much.
So one of the things you were not able to do when you were 10, I'll bet, is sit in the Rising Sun chair. So we have replicas.
Did they all know the story?
You're in Philadelphia, Professor. And I swear I did not pay him in front of the board of directors to talk about the superiority of tall presidents, but yes. But I will later. So I'm told because of our time, we're gonna do the Zoom, which is going to be the legislature. We're going to do the room, which will be the judiciary. So we've got to get a great question, and then the executive will get the finer question. How's that sound?
And he did tell me that he's about Washington's size and shape, so you get to do the executive and sit in
Leadership.
Washington's chair. Okay.
So Tyler Putman, you're in charge now.
That's right. Thank you, Professor Amar. We had some great questions from our friends online. I think we said that's the judicial branch. To paraphrase a couple of them, do you think the people involved in framing and creating the Constitution could have imagined that it would be as durable and as long-lasting as it has been?
No, I think they would have been very pleasantly surprised that America survives. They're imagining, maybe 50 years, and then if they can just get through the first 50, then perhaps they are experimenters. They are first round of state constitutions, and then actually, in many states, they have a second round of state constitutions. For example, the Articles didn't quite work, so they are doing the Constitution, and then they immediately add all these amendments, which we call a Bill of Rights. They believed in democratic experimentation. They thought the Constitution itself was an experiment. No society there have been very few self-governing societies in the history of the world, and most of the self-governing societies, you could call them republics, democracies, whatever you want, had actually failed, and none had been over anything like the geographic sweep of America even then. And we say, a lot of white people, and they're slaves, of course, but there's massive demographic diversity and religious diversity: Quakers, Congregationalists, Baptists, Anglicans, Shakers, Jews. Tremendous religious diversity, tremendous demographic diversity. Yes, I think they would have been surprised. I think that we've been able to make it work thus far. Ben Franklin, who of course gave us the Rising Sun story, also says when he I think he bumps into Miss Powell, or public, if you can keep it, and we can't take it for granted. We really can't. Republics in the history of the world, most of them did not last.
Thank you. We'd love to take just one question from this wonderful Congress we have in the room. I'll come up to the front.
I have a question. It was wonderful, thank you. I'll stand. In the Capitol, you have Washington, the apotheosis. When you look up in the dome, you have the apotheosis of George Washington sitting on a rainbow. And like the Christ or Buddha, they're all sitting on a rainbow. And down below, you have the tomb of Washington, which is empty, which represents, well, Jesus isn't there anymore because it's empty. So now you have, he is risen, the ascended master. My question is, what do you feel is the importance of our need to have a Messiah in governing us?
Wow, that's a great and deep question. This book is the first of 3 volumes trying to tell the story of America from 1760 to 2000, from the Revolution to Reagan. There's a reason I'm answering the question this way. My parents came over from a different part of the world, and we're so lucky that America let us in, and Americans don't know their own story. And someone needs to tell that story, and without a lot of political attitude. I have political views, but I'm hoping you won't deduce them from the book. This volume is the first. It's 1760 to 1840. The words that made us, how we become a we, how we become a United States, us, U.S., a pun, because we're not at the beginning. Volume 2, which I'm working on right now, is called Born Equal. It takes the story from 1840 to 1920. So it's how we get rid of slavery and promise blacks equal civil rights and political rights. It ends with women's suffrage. Volume 3 is going to be called Earth's Best Hope. It's how America becomes global and saves the world and moves away from its isolationist mission. So 240 years from the Revolution to Reagan, this huge arc. Why am I telling you this? Because actually it turns out, and this wasn't a setup, the book ends with this. There's a lot of art in this, Charles Wilson Peale and other folks. But the apotheosis of Washington actually appears twice in my last chapter, which is about women's suffrage. First, the original apotheosis, and then a really snarky cartoon mocking Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony as like the angels flanking Washington because they're making fun of women's suffrage. So it's very cool, and it begins that chapter, since I talked about my mom. The first paragraphs are all about Elizabeth Cady Stanton's elopement. When she actually refuses to say the word obey in her wedding vows. So one problem of this book is there are not very many women in it. And that's just because I didn't want to make up important women who weren't important at the time. But they're going to come on stream in Volume 2, big time. Harriet Beecher Stowe sells 3 million copies of Uncle Tom's Cabin. It sells more copies than anything else except the Bible. I'm going to come back to the apotheosis. And no woman at the founding has that kind. She's bigger than Tom Paine at the Revolution, but we don't have that at the founding. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton, she's an amazing person. So women are going to come on stage. But you asked also a question about American iconography and the apotheosis of Washington. The central character, I'm going to have Frederick Douglass, big time. Because truthfully, there are a lot of depictions of Phyllis Wheatley, and I love it, but she wasn't actually at the time as nearly so significant as she is today. Higher percentage of Americans know who Phyllis Wheatley is today, thanks to great museums like this, than the founding. So I got Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She's amazing. I got Harriet Beecher Stowe. She's amazing. I got Frederick Douglass. She's amazing. But most important of all, Abraham Lincoln. And here's why I'm telling you Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is martyred, assassinated on Good Friday in a Christian country. And he's not a conventional churchgoer, and neither was Thomas Jefferson, and George Washington is actually a little uneven in his church attendance as well, truth be told. And if Lincoln were a conventional Christian, he wouldn't have been going to a play on Good Friday, and he wouldn't have been going to a comedy on Good Friday, which he did. It's Our American Cousin. But I've got people, newspapers, that next morning comparing him to Christ. So yes, the apotheosis of Washington, but you'll see it even more with Lincoln, and the art. So Benjamin West and John Trumbull are taking a Descent of Christ from the Cross, Rubens and Pietà, that you see, and they're secularizing it. Okay, now we have secular martyrs like General Wolfe, General Montgomery, General Warren. So yes, it's a very Christian country, and these are the images they have, these are the stories they have, so they're going to depict America's great leaders in this tradition. They're going to do that for Washington, they're going to do it even bigger for Abraham Lincoln. They will.
Final question. I want to bring you into the neighborhood with the approaching 250th.
Yeah,
we're in this incredible place. I feel so blessed to walk to work every morning about 10 or 12 minutes, depending upon if I tried to go over Society Hill Towers or not. And we're surrounded by buildings where it happened, rooms where it happened, great institutions from the National Constitution Center, and just, all within 15-minute walk of where we are. It's kind of the campus of the University of America. Can you reflect a little bit on what role you think institutions like ours can play in strengthening constitutional thinking, commitment to the Constitution, sort of hitting, hopefully, a refreshing reset on the next quarter millennium?
So you were kind enough to give me a tour of the place. I hadn't been here before. I'm one of the founders of the National Constitution Center, which is my way of trying to pay Philadelphia back for the gift it gave to me, my career, and the Constitution back because on my birthday, the day of my actual birth, when my mom was there too, the Constitution makes me a U.S. citizen, even though my mom isn't a citizen and my dad isn't a citizen. They're just students from India. So I owe this huge debt to the Constitution, and I owe this huge debt to this city. So, and you gave me an amazing, and so I'm really proud of my affiliation with the National Constitution Center, and Jeff Rosen's my student, and he's an amazing guy. You gave me a tour of this place, and with Andy Lipka, we have this podcast together. We were in awe. We loved it, and I want to tell you what's great about it. And I know it's in the evening, but there are almost no kids here. Okay, that's the challenge. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, to teach our children. Okay, and this place, this city, I'm 10 years old, and it actually kind of got me excited about the thing. What I loved about this experience is I actually think it's kid-friendly. I think the Washington's tent thing is very dramatic, but all the exhibits, unlike almost every other museum or art gallery, you can actually touch stuff. And kids want to touch stuff. And you can jump in and be a soldier in that and put yourself in the shoes. So that's what we have to do. We actually have to get kids engaged. And I'm going to say a little bit more about the apotheosis. That's a challenge, okay? Because today's kids know nothing about history. They're completely historically illiterate. And if so, we die. And here's why, and it's connected. Okay, I said it's a very Christian country, but today it isn't. You see, my parents are Hindu. And we have Buddhists and atheists and agnostics. There are democracies in the world today, many more than at the founding. At the founding, it's America, and that's almost it. There's the Brits, the Swiss, no one else. Among the societies with advanced economies and all the rest. I'm not going to talk about Native American tribe. Today, half the world is democratic by population and landmass. But the other democracies, they're not multi-religious. They're not multilingual. They're not multicultural. They're not places where all the continents are represented. If you look around in America or even this room, some of our families came 250 years ago in chains. Some with bullwhips in their hands 250 years ago. Some last week. My family pretty recently. We have many more religions in America and people of no religion. Many more languages. We're the only place. Germany is not a place where the great-grandchildren of all the other continents get together. It's a great democracy, but Sweden is not that place. France is not that place. The United States is the only place. And the only thing we have in common, truthfully, is the American constitutional story and the American Constitution. None of these people are my forebears that I'm writing about, but I can choose to be part of that story, and unless we all choose to be part of that story, we have nothing in common, and we will fail. Okay? So places like this, they're absolutely... I'm a Democrat. Ronald Reagan, though, supports the National Constitution Center. He's a Republican because he understands this is sacred ground, not just in America, but in the world. Okay? Because the modern world was born in Philadelphia. Not just in 1776, but in 1787, when the Constitution was put to a vote up and down the continent. So this is hallowed ground, and you guys are doing exactly what you're supposed to do. I'm very grateful that this place exists. There are about 10 places like it. There are only 10. National Constitution Center is one. But what you're doing brilliantly, I'm glad, and they need your money, and I understand that, and that's important. But the most important thing of all is the next generation. And I think this is actually a very kid-friendly place. And well done.
Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for sticking on Zoom a little bit longer than advertised. And look forward to seeing you back here for our fall speaker series, the Read Revolution.